Texas music.
Texas wines.
Texas weather.
Texas roadkill.
The Typewriter Rodeo, Fridays on the Texas Standard and anytime on your favorite podcast app.
With an impeachment trial looming, suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton facing new scrutiny from the feds in San Antonio. The latest coming up today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Coming up, Autullo of the Austin American-Statesman on what he's learned about a federal grand jury convened in the Alamo City to hear from witnesses close to Ken Paxton. The Standard's Michael Marks on emergency steps being taken due to a disease threatening the state's $4 billion deer hunting industry. In the final month of the hottest season in Texas, DJ Susan Castle weighs in on the question, what's the ultimate Texas summer song? Also, the week in politics with the Texas Tribune and more when the Standard gets underway right after this. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 11th day of August, 2023. I'm David Brown. After the regular legislative session earlier this year and two special sessions tacked on by the governor to force lawmakers to pass property tax relief, you'd imagine there'd be something of a lull at the Texas state capitol. And you'd think you're right peering into the House and Senate chambers. But behind the scenes, there's much more activity than one might think. In fact, over on the Senate side, lawmakers are quite busy indeed preparing for a spectacle the likes of which Texas has seldom seen, an impeachment trial for a top state official. The fate of now suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton's in the Senate's hands after the House vote to impeach him back in May for a variety of alleged offenses, including securities fraud case filed in 2015, slowly moving toward trial in Harris County, and an investigation into allegations that the AG may have committed several crimes in connection to his relationship with a prominent real estate developer and friend, Nate Paul. Paul has been indicted on federal criminal charges in June, unrelated to Paxton. Paul's accused of altering financial records to obtain loans for his real estate business. But now comes word that a federal grand jury has convened in San Antonio and has called witnesses close to Ken Paxton. Ryan Autullo is chief Texas political reporter for the Austin American-Statesman, and he joins us now. Ryan, welcome.
David, good morning.
Paxton's got a lot on his plate, obviously. That impeachment trial in the Senate coming up no later than the start of September to get underway. Tell us a little bit more about this grand jury that's apparently been convening in San Antonio. What are you hearing?
As you'll remember, David, back in 2020, around this time, the feds launched an investigation into him in connection to his relationship to now famous, infamous Austin developer Nate Paul.
Right.
And this appears to be the culmination of that investigation.
Well, what are officials, the federal prosecutors, the Justice Department, what are they saying about what specifically they are looking for here, what they're trying to present to this grand jury?
So the feds, David, historically have been tight-lipped. I mean, you could ask them for a weather forecast and they would give you no comment. They just do not talk about anything.
Right.
So they're not telling us who the witnesses are, what the witnesses are saying, how far along this case is right now. But in patching things together, my colleague Tony Plahetsky and I have identified some witnesses that are testifying, and they are very close to Ken Paxton. And they will also probably be testifying before the Senate in the impeachment trial.
Well, as we've been talking about here, this on top of everything else that Ken Paxton is facing, most notably, I guess, most eminently, that impeachment trial in the Texas Senate coming up next month. Is there any way that what's happening now with that grand jury in San Antonio might factor into the impeachment proceedings?
It's a really good question, and I've spoken with many legal insiders to see if there's a strategy here. And the thought is maybe that the feds would like to wrap up their investigation, potentially with indictments, prior to the Senate trial, David, so that they can kind of take control and keep control of this. And maybe it would pressure the senators to not make this a political spectacle and show that there is a grand jury that has already reviewed these allegations.
What about Paxton's legal team? Has there been any reaction from them?
Paxton's lawyer said he has no way of knowing whether there is a grand jury going on in San Antonio or not. There is. He says he's having a hard time getting information from the feds, just like anyone else would be. I think they are prepared for anything. They know that this investigation has been going on now for 3 years. So it just adds to the many legal issues that Ken Paxton has. He's a very, very busy guy right now.
You know, something that raised a lot of eyebrows when Paxton was first impeached was that he has not been convicted of any of the crimes that he's been that have been alleged against him, at least not so far. Is there concern about the fact that this news is coming out now in the weeks just prior to impeachment? Or are supporters of Paxton raising red flags and saying this is an attempt to in some way affect that trial?
Well, certainly Paxton does not like the timing of this, because it reminds the senators who will sit as jurors that there is this federal case against him going on, and that it is potentially reaching a conclusion with a grand jury reviewing it. So he is going to have to worry about a potential federal indictment as he's worrying about trying to keep his job, return to his job as Texas Attorney General. So just a very, very stressful moment for him and his attorneys.
But of course, so far, no federal charges formally brought against Paxton, correct?
None that we know of. And we do not know, and still doing my research, when this federal grand jury may be done reviewing the case. You know, it could be weeks, it could be months. We just do not know, David.
Watch this space. Ryan Autullo is chief Texas political reporter for the Austin American-Statesman. We're going to link to his latest coverage over at texasstandard.org. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, David.
Closing arguments Thursday morning in the trial to throw out election results in a contested judicial race in Harris County. Last November, GOP candidate Erin Lunsford lost her race to incumbent district judge Tamika Kraft by about 2,700 votes. Lunsford then filed a lawsuit asking for a new election to be called. Here to tell us more about this case, Jen Rice, who's been following it for the Houston Chronicle. Jen, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me.
So what's at the heart of this? Does Erin Lunsford believe that Judge Kraft somehow should not have been elected? The gap, especially in a local race, 2,700 votes, doesn't seem that uncommon. So what's the argument being made?
Yeah, so there's actually 21 of these lawsuits. This is the first one to go to trial. So it's part of sort of a coordinated effort. But basically, the allegations started right after the election. There were ballot paper shortages at around 20 or so polling locations. Lunsford's team has determined 3,000 voters were turned away from 29 polls, and that was the basis of their lawsuit. And in the months since then, they've been adding to their list, and now they have about 17 grievances, ranging from there were ballots without signatures, there were ballots that were counted not following procedure, and now they're asking the judge to weigh in on all of it.
You mentioned part of a coordinated effort that's happening in several cases. What do you mean?
Yes. So there are 21 Republican candidates who ran in Harris County. All of them have filed these lawsuits. Like you said, in the Lunsford case, it's around 2,700 votes, but some of these are up to 35,000 vote margins.
Wow. Okay. So any evidence come out in trial that seemed to support Lunsford's claims that the election results need to be thrown out?
I would say that their main evidence is that they have gathered information from the election workers who ran the polls on Election Day. As you know, each of the polls is run by a Republican and a Democrat judge, and they've just contacted the Republicans and they have the testimony from them. Crucially, they haven't brought in a single voter who said, I wasn't able to cast a ballot.
That's interesting. Just to put a finer point on it, you mentioned that there are Democratic and Republican judges at each polling place, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Did they call in some of those polling judges to testify?
They didn't bring any of them in. They did like written depositions from them.
I see.
And so they basically have each of these judges says, I was a judge at this location and we turned away approximately 100 voters.
I see. So who are the key players in this case? Have there been any big name witnesses taking the stand or lawyers or agencies involved?
So the GOP has mostly made their case based on bringing in their own members. So they have several members of the Harris County GOP who have basically conducted their own audit, and they're presenting the results to the judge saying, I found thousands of votes that shouldn't have been counted. So this is a lot of lay people, and it remains to be seen whether the judge will, admit them as like expert witnesses or not. It seems like he may not. They did have one person from the Secretary of State's office. That's the Texas agency that, oversees elections. She was like an expert witness. She didn't argue for either side. She was just there to advise.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the few seconds we have left, I want to get back to this coordinated effort. What implications does the outcome have for those other cases that are pending?
This case will definitely influence what happens with the others because they all have the same judge.
Oh, very interesting indeed. But will they be brought before potentially before different juries if they proceed, or what is your understanding?
There's actually no jury. The judge is going to decide all on his own, and he has said it's going to take him a month to reach a ruling in this case. But I think he's taking it very deliberately because he knows that the fate of the other 20 are related to this one.
We've been speaking with Jen Rice, who covers Harris County for the Houston Chronicle. We're going to link to her reporting on this story over at texasstandard.org. Jen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, happy Friday, Wells.
Happy Friday to you. Is it really a happy Friday, David?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you tell me. A Friday is good enough as far as I'm concerned. But hey, I know you've been monitoring social media today as our social media editor. Let's hear what Texans are talking about.
Well, lots of concern out there, of course, about the weather. As Pamela Yates puts it on our Facebook page, will we all spontaneously combust? It is a good reminder that we are just beginning, well, not really beginning, but August underway, traditionally the hottest month of the year. So I think many parts of Texas looking forward to some much higher temperatures next week. Also, mine's sent to other states in the nation here. Robert Flood calls out our fellow Americans suffering from a disaster in paradise. Similarly, Esther Matthews says she's praying for Hawaii and praying it doesn't happen in Texas. Similarly, Sherry Foreman, all three of these voices from our Facebook page saying her heart is broken for Maui. As the Washington Post reports, several people have died in the flames raging through there. It has destroyed the ancient town of Lahaina and will ultimately cost billions of dollars in damage. One story we're watching, David. I'll be back with more later in the program.
We're talking about the heat. How are outdoor workers protected? The U.S. doesn't have national heat standards. We're going to be exploring that and more as the standard continues.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas CASA, where court-appointed volunteers speak up for a child's best interests during their time in foster care. More at becomeacasa.org.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. There are no federal heat standards to protect outdoor workers. And earlier this year, the Texas legislature passed a law blocking cities and counties from requiring water breaks on construction sites. How can outdoor workers keep themselves safe in the brutal Texas heat? Stella Chavez of KERA reports.
It's not yet 10 a.m. and it's already sweltering. Christian Mejia is at a construction site off I-35 in Waxahachie. He's with a crew building a new Chick-fil-A restaurant. He's been here since 3 a.m. The 32-year-old says they have to start in the middle of the night.
Trabajar en la madrugada no es muy difícil porque no hay mucho sol.
Working overnight isn't very difficult because there isn't any sun. There may be some humidity and you do sweat, but it's better than in the middle of the day.
Many workers wear protective clothing, long-sleeve shirts, hats, bandanas around their necks. Mejia says his supervisor brings a lot of water for workers. They also drink Gatorade. Mejia's worked in construction for 10 years and says he's noticed a difference.
El clima cada año va cambiando. Es más fuerte el sol, el clima, la temperatura.
The climate is changing every year. The sun, the temperature is hotter. We have felt it a lot this year.
The scientific consensus is clear. Climate change is making summers hotter. The last 8 years have been the warmest years on record. That puts outdoor workers especially at risk of heat exhaustion or a heat stroke. Parkland Health in Dallas has treated 50% more cases of heat-related illnesses this summer compared to the same time last year. Chief Medical Officer Joseph Chang says dangerously hot weather requires planning ahead.
There's the preparation before you go outside, and then there's what you do when you're outside, and there's what you do when you get home. And I think those are all important things.
Chang says hydrating before you go outside is critical. Don't wait until you're already outdoors because it could be too late. Another important reminder, cover up with long sleeves and a hat.
Put a large bucket hat on if you're working outside all day. That's actually really, really important because our head is actually where we lose a lot of our moisture, okay? And it just makes us even more dehydrated.
The National Center for Farm Worker Health has a telephone helpline that agricultural workers can call with health-related concerns. Bethany Bogus Alcalte is the center's director of research and public health programs. Recently, she heard about workers in South Texas who didn't have water.
In that particular instance, according to our colleagues, they were being punished for not finishing all the water in the water bottles, so they took away their drinking water.
Bogus Alcate says that's an extreme example, but access to water is a problem.
Typically, the issue we see on farms and in construction is just the water is too far away and people can't stop to go get it. So that's the bigger issue with people not having drinking water or access to drinking water.
And she says, don't forget about the buddy system, someone who'll watch out for you and you them as you toil in the sun. I'm Stella Chavez.
Support for Coverage of Business comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a safety-focused workers' comp provider, celebrating 25 years of its dividend program. More at texasmutual.com/dividends.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. White-tailed deer hunting generates over $4 billion of economic activity in Texas each year. That's according to Texas A&M University's Natural Resources Institute. But one big challenge facing the industry right now is chronic wasting disease, or CWD. This is a contagious neurological affliction that's of particular concern to breeders who raise herds of whitetails to sell to game ranches. After a recent rash of CWD cases in breeding facilities, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department enacted new emergency rules to manage the spread of the disease. The Texas Standard's Michael Marks has more.
There have been 9 cases of chronic wasting disease detected in Texas deer breeding facilities this year, which is quite a few.
That certainly was of grave concern to the agency, to people that are interested, about white-tailed deer as a public resource across the state.
That's John Solovsky, Wildlife Division Director for Texas Parks and Wildlife. These cases led to those new emergency rules TPWD staff enacted in late July. They do 2 main things. 1, all deer in breeding facilities must now have an external identification tag, usually attached to their ear. 2, before any deer is moved to another facility, they must test negative for CWD.
This additional surveillance we can gain by adding that requirement for that type of movement will give us better information that we're not moving CWD from one facility to another.
A positive CWD case can be devastating for a deer breeder. If just one deer tests positive, usually all the deer in that herd are euthanized, as well as any deer that's been in contact with that herd over the past 5 years.
Total depopulation remains the best method to contain and arrest the disease where it exists.
But while CWD is a serious concern for folks in the deer business, some members of the industry aren't sold on the emergency rules. Kevin Davis is the executive director of the Texas Deer Association, which represents breeders in the state.
Obviously, as an industry, we know we are going to be regulated. I think the angst and the frustration that we face right now is we're being regulated through emergency order. In our opinion, that's indicative of a regulatory agency working around the Texas legislature to drive their agendas.
The legislature is responsible for writing laws about how the state will manage CWD, and it's done that. But these emergency rules were issued unilaterally by Parks and Wildlife, without debate or public comment.
The thought process that we need to test between breeders is probably not a bad thought process, but the way we arrived there was simply not inclusive of the body being governed.
The long-term solution to CWD, though, may not have anything to do with regulation, but with genetics.
In 10, maybe 15 years, these deer breeders have made quantum leaps in antler size in the deer that they're producing. And they can do the same thing, and in the process of doing the same thing with the genetics in regard to CWD.
That's James Kroll, a professor emeritus at Stephen F. Austin State University. He spent his career studying chronic wasting disease. Other researchers have identified genetic markers that make white-tailed deer more resistant to CWD, and breeders are cultivating those traits in their herds. This has been done before with sheep, who are susceptible to a disease similar to CWD called scrapie.
What the sheep people did was put together a program. They found out there was a genetic link, and they started breeding sheep that were resistant to it. Not immune, but resistant. And they have pretty much reduced the occurrence of scrapie in sheep by doing so.
Texas Parks and Wildlife's regulations for deer breeders will remain in place in the meantime, and this most recent emergency rule may just become the regular rule. John Solowski of Parks and Wildlife told me that agency staff will recommend that the emergency order on testing and ear tags be made permanent at the department's next board meeting on August 23rd. I'm Michael Marks for the Texas Standard.
Wow, how time flies. We're fast approaching 29 minutes past the hour Texas Standard Time. We got the Texas Roundup just ahead. Stick around.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Extended Campus at UT Austin, connecting individuals and organizations with professional education programs focused on supporting career growth and workforce training. More at extendedcampus.utexas.edu.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Thomas. 86% of Texas is now experiencing drought conditions. The worst is north of San Antonio, where one county has had so little rainfall that the wells are running dry. Houston Public Media's Rob Salinas has more.
The updated drought map shows all of Kendall County experiencing exceptional drought conditions.
It's the harshest I've seen, let's put it that way.
Stephen Zeller is with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension in Kendall County.
Virtually, we have no stream or no creeks or no rivers flowing anywhere in the county.
Zeller says farmers are selling off animals and bringing in water as their wells start to run dry. Compounding problems is the fact that wild animals, like feral hogs, are competing with livestock for the few water resources available.
So then we've got a water supply that's really, really off. It's got a lot of plankton, turning green, really kind of nasty looking.
I'm Rob Salinas in Houston.
Texans set yet another record yesterday for the amount of power being used to cool homes and businesses. It's the 10th time the record was broken, but it could be short-lived as ERCOT is forecasting demand to peak even higher later today. Civil rights groups have accused Keller ISD and a Fort Worth charter school of implementing anti-LGBTQ policies. KERA's Tolawani Osibamawo reports the groups want a formal investigation into what they say are civil rights violations.
One complaint targets Keller ISD's policy to limit bathroom and locker room use to a student's assigned sex at birth. The other involves a family who says their transgender child wasn't allowed to join a choir that matched their gender identity and vocal range. Chloe Kempf is an attorney with ACLU Texas.
Every child in Texas, no matter their sexual orientation or gender identity or race, should have the freedom to be themselves at school, free from discrimination.
The ACLU called for a similar investigation in November into Keller ISD's ban on books referencing gender fluidity. I'm Toluwani Osibamawo in Dallas.
Austin native Johnny Hardwick has died. He's best known as the actor behind Dale Gribble, the conspiracy theorist from the animated series King of the Hill.
I know what's wrong with it. It's a Ford. You know what they say Ford stands for, don't you? It stands for fix it again, Tony.
You're thinking of a Fiat, Dale.
Hardwick was a graduate of Texas Tech who performed stand-up comedy in Dallas and Austin before going on to voice King of the Hill. His body was found inside his Austin home on Tuesday, but no foul play is suspected. He was 64 years old. I'm Matt Thomas from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, providing same-day results and custom treatment plans to tackle allergies at the root of the problem. Over 40 locations throughout Texas. More info at aspireallergy.com.
33 minutes past the hour. I'm David Brown. It's almost back to school time across Texas, but students in football, cross country, and marching band have already been working hard, practicing during this summer's record-setting heat. School districts like Hays CISD in the Texas Hill Country are taking steps to keep everyone safe. Becky Fogel of KUT reports that involves keeping students cool now and preparing for a warmer future.
2, 3, 4, and flex.
Students holding tubas, trumpets, and mellophones stand in neat rows in a parking lot at Johnson High School in Buda for marching band practice. It's 8 in the morning and already over 80 degrees. To stay cool in the bright hot sun, students take a water break about every 15 minutes.
Get a quick sip, gush and go.
That's right, the water break is called a gush and go. Students zip to the sidewalk to drink from their gallon-sized gray water bottles.
Everyone must drink.
One of the students at practice is Kyle, who's a junior. He's one of 3 drum majors. Kyle's excited for practice, but a little worried about how other students are going to do in the heat.
Because we had a couple freshmen get not like heat stroke or anything, but we had a few. I think we had a few freshmen pass out in our spring camp.
But he says so far, practice has been going great and no one has passed out. Another junior, Addie, thinks the more frequent water breaks are a big help.
And we get a lot more than we used to, and it's a lot better, because last year was really rough.
Addie says last year, the water breaks happened every 30 minutes or so. But this year, she says other members of the marching band seem to be doing well in the heat, including her section, which is flute and piccolo.
We actually haven't had anybody visit the med tent really the past week, so I think our students are doing really, really good handling the heat.
And even if students aren't feeling sick from the heat, the med tent has got a bunch of stuff to help students cool down and stay hydrated.
So here we have a cooler of ice with some Gatorades and Pedialyte.
That's Carolyn Meredith, a parent volunteer, also known as a Band-Aid.
Different parents volunteer every day. We volunteer in 2-hour shifts, and then we switch out throughout the day. And anytime the kids are outside, Band-Aids are on the field with them just to make sure they're all taken care of.
More water breaks and a med tent are just a couple of the ways Hays CISD officials are trying to keep the marching band safe in the heat. Jason Adam is the district's assistant director of fine arts. He says another precaution they take is that band directors participate in University Interscholastic League, or UIL, heat safety training.
Plus CPR, first aid, AED training as well. The student leaders in the band program here at Johnson have done a great job throughout the summer sending out on social media some training videos about things to prepare for and how to dress and how to acclimate and stay hydrated, and have done a really good job of making sure everybody's prepared and ready to go.
Students also practice inside during the afternoon to avoid the hottest temperatures of the day. And eventually, the more than 300-member marching band and color guard will have a lot more indoor practice space. That's because Hays CISD voters approved a bond proposition in May to create a fine arts gym and a larger band hall at Johnson High School.
So part of that is because of the growth of this program. They'll be able to have some larger indoor rehearsals, which will help in the heat. So we're looking forward to that.
But another measure on the ballot to protect students from extreme weather failed. If voters had approved Bond Proposition D, the district could have borrowed millions of dollars to install covered pavilions for fine arts and athletics at each high school. Each one would have been about 84,000 square feet, which is larger than a football field. Tim Savoy is the chief communication officer for Hays CISD.
And of course, the big component of them would have been shade, and generally they're significantly cooler under those pavilions than you would be if you were out in the sunlight and the heat in this case.
Savoy says even though there wasn't enough support for the pavilions this time around, that could change in the years ahead. He points out something similar happened with artificial turf. About 5 years ago, people preferred grass to turf, but that started to change in response to increasingly hot weather.
The reality we face is that we are going to be under water restrictions in the hottest part of the summer, and without water, grass is going to die.
Savoy says similarly, voters might eventually see pavilions as more essential, especially after this particularly brutal summer.
And I think probably after this summer, those pavilions may scooch a little closer to the need column from the want column.
But with or without the pavilions, the unrelenting heat doesn't seem to be putting a damper on students' enthusiasm for marching band. Kyle is pumped for what's ahead.
I'm just really excited. This year's going to be a great year.
Addie agrees.
I'm so excited. I am a dancer, so I'm so excited for the choreo. We may already have the opening choreo, spoiler alert, and it's absolutely amazing, and I love it so much.
The new school year and shorter marching band practices start in mid-August. I'm Becky Fogel in Buda.
Support for Texas Standard comes from TCU's Burnett School of Medicine, striving to improve patient-doctor relationships by making communication an essential part of the medical school curriculum. Learn more at mdschool.tcu.edu.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. How will you remember summer 2023? Through the years, this red-hot season we're in has been romanced by music with considerably more staying power than the season itself. FM. Susan, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Hey, thanks for having me, David. And are you sure we want to remember this summer?
Well, there's that. The heat. Yeah, I totally get that. And a lot of other things, too, perhaps. But, something I was thinking about, summer is hot in music, pop music, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's just that mindset. Kids are out of school. Everybody's on vacation. You're looking for a soundtrack to your summer. So I would agree with you.
What do you think makes a great summer song? You were talking a little bit about that. When you just think more about the category of summer songs, what would fit into that category, even if you don't say the word summer? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I think that has changed since I moved to Texas. So I came here back in 1990 from the Chicago area. And, I came here for a job. And full disclosure, I had no plans on moving to Texas. I wasn't even ever going to visit Texas because my idea of Texas was, on the westerns, the tumbleweeds and the dusty trails and stuff like that. Yeah. And, saloon fights and what have you. So it has changed, but I have discovered one summer song that doesn't really talk about summer, but it really paints a picture of my idea of what summer was in Texas. And the gentleman who sings, it's a duet. Roy Rogers is one of them, and he wasn't born in Texas. He's the singing cowboy, of course. Yeah. And he was born in Ohio, but his duet partner, his lovely third wife, Dale Evans, was born in Uvalde. So this song, to me, really conjures up summertime in Texas, and it is a Sons of the Pioneers song called Cool Water that was written by, because he was a founding member of the Sons of the Pioneers. Roy Rogers was, but it was written by a different member, and it really conjures up the thirst that you get after a long, hot summer in Texas.
Cool water, water
You know, you'd think that California would have a lock on this summer music category, Susan. What way? It's endless summer. Does Texas have much to offer when it comes to summer songs of a more contemporary bent to it? I mean, I think a lot of, Cool Water is a classic. It's almost part of the songbook, but what about more modern songs?
More modern? Are you talking like 1969 modern
or
I'll
2023
modern? Because I've got two for us.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Why don't we begin? Let's work chronologically toward today. How about, you say 69?
Yes, so 1969. A great summer song with a Texas connection is a classic by Sylvester Stewart, also known as Sly Stone of Sly and the Family Stone. Yeah, he was born in Denton, which is about 40 miles north of Dallas.
Right.
So he was born there, but the family moved to the Bay Area where the summers, of course, are cold. So I'm thinking that this song he must have written when he was in the San Francisco area, because it celebrates school being over for the summer and going to the county fair in the country sun, which sounds a little bit too quaint for the Texas heat that we have been enduring since June. So not sure he was thinking of Texas when he wrote it, but it is a definite perennial summer classic. Hot fun in the summertime.
County fair in the country sun, and everything is
Yeah, that's a great song. And again, I think it's top of mind for a lot of folks, although I don't think a lot of folks know about the Texas connection, like people like you, of course, know. Hey, by the way, since you're in the studio, let's do a little challenge. This is going to be easy for you if you're making the kind of connections you've already made. Remember back in, I guess it was the early to mid 90s, there was a song that was called Possum Kingdom. By the Toadies. You know the Texas connection there?
I do. Dallas.
Yeah, that's right. Toadies from Dallas. How about the summer anthem of 2003? Yes! Maybe you remember a song called Crazy in Love.
Crazy in Love by Beyonce?
That's the one. And what about Seals and Crofts' Summer Breeze?
Oh my goodness, yeah, they're a Dallas connection as well.
Yeah, Jim Seals, Dash Crofts, childhood buddies from Texas. What about now? Are people still doing summer songs?
Well, I will tell you, there is a band in Austin, Texas that just released a new summer song. And it is, I would say it was definitely inspired and written for the current hellacious summer of 2023 that we're having all over Texas, actually all over the world, but specifically here in Austin. And there is definitely nothing quaint about this song. It's, kind of about the face-melting record heat that we are trying to survive. And the band is T-Bird and the Breaks, and there's no sugarcoating this summer song. It is called It's Hot.
It's feeling exciting, really damn hot. You think it might get cool at night, but it's not. The beer won't stay cold, the pork won't stay pulled. You can't smoke a J.
That's Austin group T-Bird and the Breaks. It's hot indeed. Could you tell me a little bit about I would mention earlier TMX FM, which is like the ultimate Texas music stream, and I would imagine some of these artists we've been talking about pop up there.
Yes, it was cooked up by Matt Riley, who is the program director of KUTX, where I'm a DJ. And he wanted us to put together an all-Texas channel, and we have encompassed all of Texas, everything from, Tex Ritter to Ghetto Boys and everything in between. And you can stream it at tmx.fm. It is a deep dive into all the cool artists and great songs that this state has produced.
For any season, by the way. We've been talking summer songs with a tie to Texas, and of course there's that music stream 24/7 with Texas music from all over the stylistic map. TMX.FM, Susan Castle of KUTX in Austin, part of the team behind that Texas music stream. Hey, I got an idea. Let's make our own playlist. Got a Texas summer song you'd like to nominate? Well, reach out right now, Texas Standard on social media, or the Contact Us link at texasstandard.org. Susan Castle, it's been lots of fun. I hope the rest of your summer is tons of fun, too, and we'll be listening.
Thanks for having me.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Oncology, with a reminder during Summer Sun Safety Month about skin cancer awareness, limiting sun exposure, and using broad-spectrum sunscreen with at least 30 SPF can reduce risk. More at texasoncology.com.
You're listening to the Texas Standard. I'm Bianca Elisa Perez with Typewriter Rodeo. We write poems on the spot. My best day. In our kitchen at the back of the house, I am talking to you about my worries. The receding river of my mind still bringing the flood again. And you are cooking rice or cutting yellow onion or brewing medium roast beans and listening to my rumble, my crash, my shake. You, so patient, so slow, with your love, you tell me breathe. You tell me let us be lighter together. This is a good day, best day, favorite day, filled with sweet honey dripping down the chin. Laughs bouncing off our wooden floors, a day of cheekful kisses. The flood, the river, gone now with you here. This is Bianca Lisa Perez with the Typewriter Rodeo, and you are listening to the Texas Standard.
And make sure to check out more episodes of the Typewriter Rodeo wherever you get your podcasts. Time once again for the week that was in Texas politics. Joining us this week, Matthew Watkins, managing editor for news and politics at the Texas Tribune. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton's legal team last weekend filing motions to dismiss articles of impeachment against him. What are you hearing about their approach, and does this seem to be a viable strategy, at least from Paxton's perspective?
Yeah, good question. I mean, what they seem to be hoping is that they can end this trial before it begins. They are asking the Senate to essentially dismiss every article of impeachment against him. There will be a vote on the first day of the trial in which the Senate will decide on whether to do that. They need a majority of senators to do it. And basically that would do it. That would end it. Whether it's a viable strategy is a more difficult question because, you know, the senators, of course, are under this gag order where they can't discuss the case at all. So we're really not getting a great sense about how they feel about this trial, you know, in the run-up to it.
Next up, Lina Hidalgo. I think that's a name that a lot of folks are familiar with, Harris County judge, and considered by many to be a sort of rising star among Texas Democrats. She's announced she's taking a leave of absence to get treatment for clinical depression. And, well, tell us a little bit more about what she has said about this.
Right. So she said that she was diagnosed with depression in July, that she checked herself into an out-of-state facility in order to be cared for. She hopes to be back in early September. But you're right. She's been very open about this, right? You know, in the past, you might have seen politicians try to hide this. They would see it as something that they could be attacked for. But, you know, she's really saying this is an illness just like any physical illness, and you need treatment, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And you should, you know, I think trying to serve as an example of people, you know, being open about this, confronting it, and trying to do what they can to, you know, get better.
What's happening with county leadership in the interim?
So Rodney Ellis, one of the county commissioners, will be kind of taking over her duties of presiding over the commissioners' court meetings. Meanwhile, her chief of staff will be sort of running her office in her absence. So, you know, the plan is to kind of continue as normal as the county government. It's just that Hidalgo won't be there for a while that's happening.
Yeah. I want to shift to a story we've been covering a little bit here at Texas Standard. Fairfield Lake State Park, been quite the public battle between a real estate developer and Texas Parks and Wildlife. What's the latest there?
Right. So as many of your listeners know, that land was being leased by Texas Parks and Wildlife. It was sold to a developer recently at the end of that lease, Todd Industries. about 5,000 acres, and that organization wants to build, sort of a luxury housing facility on the site. Texas Parks and Wildlife has indicated that they want to use eminent domain to condemn the land and get it back. But this week it was revealed that Todd Industries has sort of already begun construction on their project before, that official filing can be made. That doesn't actually make it that much harder under law to get the land. But I think the question is, how desirable is it as a state park if, there have been houses starting to be built on it? I don't think we quite know the answer to that. We'll have to see over the next few weeks.
Yes, very interesting story, and one that folks at the Texas Tribune continue to track. Matthew Watkins, managing editor for news and politics at the Texas Tribune. Matthew, thanks so much and have a great weekend.
You too.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Wells Dunbar, monitoring the talk of Texas on this Friday. A busy one online there, Wells?
Yeah, busy. It is the waning days of summer, as we've been talking about here.
Waning.
I really enjoyed that conversation you had with Susan there about some of the top tracks.
Man, she knows her music. She sure knows her music, yeah. And the TMX.FM stream is a fun listen for sure. Take it from me.
Yeah, super cool
it's good stuff.
And we're getting a couple recommendations out there on social media. I like this one from the aptly named Helena Handbasket there on Twitter. Helena recommends Pat Green, Alamo City's own Pat Green, Wave on Wave, because it's one stinking heat wave after another, I think. Yeah, getting to the core of that question you and Susan were talking about, do we really want to remember this summer when it comes to the weather?
Looking for something fun here, right? I mean, that's part of it. I'm hoping that we're going to get some great suggestions from listeners and from some of our own producers. Shelley Brisbane, as a lot of us behind the scenes know, is quite the musicologist, and she's already piping in saying she's got a list. So wouldn't it be great if we could get these on Spotify somehow? The Texas Standard Summer playlist.
Yeah, I'm digging that idea.
Pretty fun.
we do have a Spotify playlist each day, running down all the music that you hear on the show, but you got the gears turning up here. Maybe we can put together a little Texas Standard Summer playlist. I'm thinking, of course, my go-to is more like Houston rap. So I was thinking maybe some UGK, Underground Kings. I'm thinking I Choose You. That was a beautiful song. They've got this really sunny beat from, I believe it's the folks in 3-6 Mafia that put the beat together there. And then you've got the Outkast guest verse, truly a sort of Mount Rushmore of Southern hip-hop there.
Y'all might not realize this, listeners. Wells is hardcore UGK. There's a picture in our studio that I believe Wells is responsible for hanging of UGK. We're talking to a super fan here.
Yeah, the UGK, the Underground Kings. Good stuff there, to be sure. But yeah, I'd love to hear more recommendations out there. We get lots of information and feedback on Facebook, including this bit of information I didn't know from Victor Paez, who says, I'm okay with Buc-ee's going to Ohio, but could they give us a Wawa or a Quick Trip in exchange?
I know
lots of people are into that Wawa coffee there. Apparently Ohio getting its first ever Buc-ee's. This per a post from the mayor of Huber Heights. Haven't been there. Apparently it's a suburb of Dayton. But Midwest Ohio there, getting their own Buc-ee's superstation there. And we've really just seen, the beaver spread its wings, to mix my animal metaphors there, with that Texas gas station really just taking off across the country and really setting a sort of model for, many of these sort of, just massive regional gas stations there. So interesting.
Beaver spreading its wings.
Interesting news to see there.
Yeah, for our fans from Philadelphia area, we know that the Wawa is famous for its hoagies, not so much for its coffee. But yeah, I'm ready for it. We're out of time for the big broadcast. News continues 24/7. TexasStandard.org. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.
A devastating winter storm, millions without power, hundreds dead. How could this happen in the energy capital of America?
The market was killing people in their homes, and I had lost faith in it. And every decision we made at that point forward was to get the lights on.
I'm Mose Buchel. I'll be your host for The Disconnect, Power, Politics, and the Texas Blackout. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.